Hello, ladies and gentlemen. If you've been following my recent videos, I've been evaluating all the rework characters, saying how good they are, what exactly changes in terms of their builds, and overall just praising the rework system. However, there's one big flaw that I didn't address and kind of just swept under the rug in these videos. And this video is going to address that flaw, the signature Lightcones of all of these rework characters. Hopefully by the end of this video, I can make it clear what my stance is on the current flaws of rework characters, how exactly this is an issue, and how this affects some reworks going forward if it continues. First, let's talk about the most interesting unit here, Kafka. Kafka's update allowed her to be a better enabler all around. This is no different from last time, she's just better at basically everything she used to do. However, the main element that really changed Kafka in her Lightcone choice is her ultimate. Her ultimate, allowing a follow-up attack stack to be restored, is huge for a very specific interaction. Due to the nature of Kafka's rework giving a lot of attack, due to her EHR conversion, using an ERR rope on Kafka is not that big of a damage loss as it used to be. Previously, Kafka's effect hit rate requirements were so low that not building it at all is optimal. Since it's higher now, obviously effect hit rate gets more value due to its conversion. Since Kafka right now is hard locked to using Black Swan or Jiao Cho, consistent defense shred is not that hard to come across. With all of these elements of her rework combined, it basically leads to one Lightcone that's very accessible that she can use. Tutorial. Due to the nature of Kafka's enabler status, getting more ults on Kafka leads to more damage through detonations, which grants more follow-up attack to do more detonations again to do more damage again. The effect hit rate stat on Tutorial is quite useful, 40% is a lot and basically hits Silverwolf's trace by itself, and each Kafka follow-up attack can generate 8 energy through the power of this LC. Assuming you have defense shred consistently, which should be pretty easy with a DOT team, Kafka with Tutorial doesn't even need an energy rope to consistently do 2-turn ultimates than the usual 3-turn. And assuming you have ERR rope and set, in certain situations, you can even get 1-turn ultimates. However, there's some limitations to this. Having consistent QPQ is RNG based and needs ridiculous fine-tuning to get rid of that RNG, but I guess it is possible. Getting hit is an inevitability in DOT teams, but again that's RNG. Or triggering Kafka's trace, which grants energy on shocked enemies dying, which is this trace right here, means that it's actually possible to get a 1-turn ult, but the limitations may be a little too much. The 1-turn ult setup is pretty limited because of that, and most of the time pure fiction will be its main usage, but still, even without thoughtful planning, Tutorial is a very competitive LC for simply allowing shorter Kafka ults, which is the bulk of her contribution in team damage and enabling. So, how does it match up to her Signature? Overall, Signature has higher damaging stats, however the effect hit rate is lower, and the speed on her Signature Lightcone can be offset by a win set using Tutorial on shorter ult rotations. And it needs to be said that Kafka shortening her rotation is a really big deal even if you're losing a lot of stats because of it. Black Swan at the current moment is weak enough that losing damage on Kafka may be an issue without her Signature Lightcone, but with high on the wings looking like a stronger DOT DPS, it's gonna be a lot more crucial to have Kafka's main source of enabling. That's not even mentioning how mechanically strong cutting down ult rotations are. Even if the Signature is a 12% team DPS increase compared to Tutorial, which it probably isn't, Tutorial can still pull out simply because Black Swan wants the minimum 3 Arcana stacks to splash her DOT, more than 2 stacks of Arcana and just hitting 12% harder. Isolence may mechanically also prefer more detonations than more stats. Because of this, Kafka's LC has a pretty good baseline but has less potential later on as Kafka's personal damage becomes less relevant. And so, Kafka's Signature may not be able to do much of the things that a free 4-star Lightcone may be able to do, which is kind of sad. I think it's very good that Tutorial is so competitive that it becomes a side grade, but you would expect her Signature to be somewhat better at what it does. It definitely needs a rework. Next is Blade. Blade should be looked at in the scope of E1. Not only because Blade is more accessible and you may be able to already have his E1, but the bulk of his multiplier updates is in E1. At E0 he's just okay, but E1 is really where Blade starts becoming competitive. The tldr of Blade's kit that's relevant to this video is he is now pure HP scaling, his follow-up attack gives more energy, his ult hits harder, and he takes a portion of his healing to fuel his HP loss tally. Even before Blade's rework and Hyacine, Blade at E1's best in slot by a small margin was actually Maidi's LC. While it doesn't seem like it should be that way and it sounds like I'm lying, it actually makes a lot of sense. Both Lightcones give max HP, you can see right there the same value, but Maidi has overall higher base HP. Blade's signature gives crit rate by 18%, while Maidi's signature gives incoming healing by 20%. This is actually really strong and maybe better than crit rate because Blade actually scales off healing now. While crit rate may be a stronger buff by itself, you also get more of it than healing stats. And as we know, Blade's E1 turns better healing into HP loss into more multiplier for his enhanced basic attack and ultimate, with a higher gap if Blade spams his ult, because when Blade uses his ult, he clears off a portion of his HP loss tally. The last part of these LCs is also really important to note. Blade's signature has a really strange uptime issue. For example, if he has 4 stacks and uses his enhanced basic attack gets the damage percent buff, but the buff disappears. Then he does his follow-up attack because he's at 4 stacks and he went into 5, and when he does his follow-up attack, it doesn't actually get buffed because he doesn't reduce his HP on his follow-up attack. A worse scenario, if you try to use his ultimate while his HP is lower than 50%, he doesn't lower his HP but heals himself. Because of that, the nuke ultimate is completely unbuffed by the LC's damage percent. While you can offset this limitation with better play, it is mostly unavoidable to happen more than once in the battle. Maidi's signature though is a huge damage boost, but it only realistically affects Blade's ultimate. But since Blade's ult does actually a lot of damage, the disparity between these two LCs in terms of damage percent stats is actually not that far behind. Enabling ult and skill to drain with Maidi's LC to give an additional stack to Blade can also net you more follow-ups. Around 3 to 5, depending on how many cycles you take in Memories of Chaos. Combined with the previous two other factors in terms of base HP and incoming healing, you went from Maidi's LC being a marginal upgrade as long as Blade is E1 and has 100% crit rate to a straight up upgrade no matter your crit rate investment. Once again, you have a signature here that's mechanically weaker than the other Lightcones, except this one is replaced by a limited Lightcone for a different character. This is a pretty big deal for the Blade banner because of his signature not even being the best in slot for himself. And past E1, Blade's Eidolons are pretty bad, just don't even look at this E2. Because of this, it is more productive to simply put Blade on the Rappa cone and pull Triby's E1. That Eidolon overall has higher value and contributes more to Blade's damage than Blade's signature LC and his Eidolon's past E1, due to the fact that mechanically his LC is just doing nothing and is a pure stat stick. And stat stick LCs, as you're gonna learn in this video, are much easier to power creep. If you already have Blade's signature, I wouldn't suggest pulling Maidi's LC as the upgrade is not worth it over Triby or Hyacine Eidolons, but if you don't have Blade's LC, there's no reason why you should pull Blade's LC when his support Eidolons hit harder, and if you can wait later, Maidi's LC is better than his current options. This is a pretty common problem to older characters because you probably noticed that this isn't the case for a lot of the newer characters. Dr. Ratio was released way after Blade, and Dr. Ratio was at the point where LCs mechanically started becoming actually useful. Dr. Ratio's signature LC providing more debuffs, making certain team comps possible when they otherwise wouldn't be. Acheron's LC gave faster ults that no other LC competed with, and Robin's giving energy to herself is pretty critical for certain strategies. Blade's LC suffers from the old design where LCs used to be just raw stat sticks. And with newer LCs becoming stronger mechanically for him, it has started to become really sad. Definitely, Blade's LC needs a rework to give it more mechanical strength. Next is Jingliu. Similar to Blade, Jingliu's signature is a pure stat stick, but much better due to consistency and rarer stats. However, it doesn't really escape Maidi's LC being competitive. Actually, I'd say that it might be worse than Blade. Maidi's LC, utility-wise, effectively gives more energy to Jingliu due to the self-HP loss. And unlike Blade, Jingliu's skill actually does a lot of damage and really does like the damage percent Maidi's LC has. The only rough part is the incoming healing becoming pretty useful, but nevertheless the utility and max HP boost allows it to become head-to-head with Jingliu's own signature. Jingliu's banner is in a similar state to Blade, arguably worse since you couldn't possibly have lost to Jingliu on a 50-50. After E1, her Eidolons are a tad bit better, but still not competing with wheelchair Eidolons to buff her damage, meaning Jingliu's banner is a very low value banner, since you'd much rather be pulling Tribi to buff Jingliu or Hyacinth down the line. If you do not want those units and simply want an LC for Jingliu, it would be much better to just wait for Maidi's LC. And if I'm going to take a shot at the dark here, because of Hyacinth's banner being timed like that, you probably wouldn't even have a choice in the first place of pulling Jingliu's LC due to the lack of resources, because you've pulled Hyacinth's signature already. That's the life of a limited unit for you, I guess. I really don't think signatures for DPS characters, especially limited ones like Jingliu, should have mechanically stronger choices that isn't their signature. Again, it's a really outdated design choice, and since we're already at this point, there's no going back, and might as well just rework this Lightcone. Last, but certainly not the least, is Silverwolf. This one is possibly the funniest case of signature LCs being not as good for the unit it's intended to. The main change concerned with here is Silverwolf's energy gain getting buffed, her base chances getting higher, and her ult damage being actually really noticeable. The obvious competition with her signature is, once again, Tutorial. This Lightcone is just way too good. It's so self-sufficient on Silverwolf and does a lot of mechanically strong things. It allows her shorter ults, allowing windset builds, allows more SP positivity due to the shorter ults, and has a higher EHR stat that makes you build more crit for her sub DPS numbers, in comparison with her signature, which is a straight up stat stick. Because Tutorial actually gives more effect hit rate, the stats it has to catch up with aren't actually too much. And due to how spammy Silverwolf's ult is, especially with her E1 allowing one-turn ults to happen, Silverwolf would rather just run Tutorial as a support. If you're really looking for a stat stick for personal damage and higher DPS on her Silverwolf, her best in slot is not her signature, but it's actually Cypher's LC. And even then, tutorial spamming capabilities are going to end up with higher scores in Apocalyptic Shadow, which favors breaking. Pure Fiction favors ult spams for windset and more uptime, and is very synergistic with some Pure Fiction blessings. And in Memories of Chaos, squeezing that last bit of motion value through Silverwolf's ult can do a lot for low cycle runs. Then just in general, the majority of Silverwolf's damage comes from her ult, and so the gap between a Silverwolf with her signature with a Silverwolf that has tutorial is not going to be a lot, and signature may end up worse even at E1. If you're looking for pure number upgrades instead of mechanical ones like tutorial, again, it's Cypher's LC just ends up being better. And so you have a signature LC that's mechanically weaker than a 4-star and weaker than another signature as a stat stick. How fun. This is pretty much suffering from success, because while that means Silverwolf's signature is pretty low value, it does mean that tutorial allows more investment into E1, which turns Silverwolf into one of the best support sub DPS characters, similar to Tribi. And you can go a step further and get E2 to make her the perfect Akron support. So this leaves us with all of the rework characters that have a signature that's a side grade at best and a downgrade at worst. The only character that I have signature of in this entire group is Blade. And while I'm overall happy for his buffs, I really love his buffs, I've always had issues with his LC being really weird, and 2 years later I wish it would have been updated to fit his new design better than just a raw stat stick. I assume Jingliu mains are at the same camp, especially because Jingliu's LC giving crit damage just isn't that useful when Jingliu already gets 270% crit damage by herself. Yeah, that's pretty weird. I assume Silverwolf mains are pretty happy though, because this is her Lightcone after all. I'm not really sure about what Kafka mains think that her signature is not. I think it's important to look at characters that are most likely to get reworked and their Lightcones to see that this will not be the only time it happens. Jingyuan's LC is going to suffer a similar fate in having support Eidolons and support Lightcones becoming more useful for him than his actual investment points, which is not exclusive to him. It's probably also going to happen to Zila, and it's probably going to happen to Argenti too. Sparkle's LC being less useful than Sunday's LC for her best in slot DPS is also pretty sad. But it's not all doom and gloom, since mechanical old LCs like Imbiber to Lunay actually has a very solid effect that they can rework him around. ERR rope on a destruction LC is very unique. Either way, I do hope that the next time they do these reworks, they would fine-tune the LC to fit the new designs more. Just to clarify, none of their SIGs are at a bad level and they're still comfortably second to third best in slot. It's just underperforming compared to other options that don't make a lot of sense why it should be that way. Again, the Lightcone Genie is out of the bottle at this point. 5 stars right now should have undisputed best in slots become their signature, because the game is already balanced around it that anomalies just end up worse than what they could be. Overall, I think the rework system is still good, but it's not perfect, and this is one of the flaws that they should fix, I think. If nothing else, it should just be treated as a reward to the older players that stuck around with their signature Lightcones. But yeah, I hope you guys like this video. Like, comment, share, do all the algorithm stuff. Join my membership if you want to. Thanks to Man42 for the highest tier. And yeah, I should be posting a new video next week, and I'm going to be leak watching for the new leaks for 3.5 if that's going to be this week. And yeah, I hope you guys like this video, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.